Saddle up the bikes and prepare the devastating charge. Today we're talking White Scars in 9th edition and why they might be the strongest marine melee chapter right now. Hello and welcome back to Warsbets Tactics, where today we're focusing on everything White Scar, so hopefully this will be entertaining for any aspiring Khans out there. In the video we're going to talk over the speed-loving Mongolian themed chapter, talking about how they're performing right now, going over their core rules and some of the options that I think are strongest, looking over their unique datasheets and some of the options and Codex Space Marines that are best for them, and finishing up by talking about a competitive list. So recent tournament performance seems to have White Scars performing very well indeed, according to Warhammer 40k Stats Center, who I thoroughly recommend for keeping up with some of the recent tournament data. They're currently sitting at around a 50% win rate, beating Blood Angels and Space Wolves by a fair bit and Black Templars by a bit more. Throughout 9th edition they also seem to be consistently placing highly at events. They've won 2 grand tournaments in the last 3 months, kind of similar performance to Ultramarines, and not a million miles behind Dark Angels, despite being played by far fewer players than either of these factions. I think it is kind of telling just how well the White Scars are doing, just because as a chapter there are far fewer people who play White Scars compared with say Blood Angels and Space Wolves, which have had their own separate model lines and codexes for ages, and are generally just a lot more well known. So let's talk about what makes White Scars so strong right now. Their chapter tactic as it goes is a really good one. It doesn't really increase direct damage dealing, but it means that you're far more likely to be able to make charges, and when you're in combat, you've got a lot of flexibility with falling back and re-engaging. Their chapter tactic allows them to advance and charge, and that really amps up the threat range of their melee units. It's great on bikes and outriders as they'll auto-advance 6 inches, but it's actually equally if not more powerful on very slow moving units. Perhaps things like Blade Guard veterans, who when they can comfortably advance every turn, could theoretically be making charges up to 24 inches away if the stars align. That's pretty crazy for a marine unit on foot. When their units are in combat or if they get locked up by the enemy, they can fall back and charge, meaning that your opponent can't just tie them up with a tar pit unit. And for a lot of units they're also able to opportunistically shoot off assault weapons as well. White Scars can advance and shoot assault weapons for no penalty, making them a solid pick with certain units, perhaps things like Inceptors or Assault Intercessors. To newer players, maybe not quite as instantly attractive as the chapters that amp up damage output, but in real games, this trait is incredibly strong. If you really did want to play White Scars in a different way though, and make them into a direct damage dealing chapter, you could maybe take something like Born Heroes and Whirlwind of Rage and just have them hit exceptionally hard, and hopefully rely on their stratagems and other movement options to get them there. In general though, most people tend to play White Scars as White Scars and not as successors. Their super doctrine is very nasty as well as the extra AP to melee weapons, their units also get +1 damage on the charge as well. It's an awesome buff, particularly on any low damage weapons out there. Things like chainswords and lightning claws will punch far above their weight. Provided you're hitting something with multi-wounds though, then it's going to make a difference on virtually everything. Can be a good target for using that 2 command point stratagem to put a unit into this doctrine early if it's going to make that big a difference. From turn 3 though, the White Scars army really goes into rage mode. Even a few shattered units can still really do a lot of damage. I would bear in mind though that you only get this on the charge, you don't get it if you were charged, unlike the Blood Angels doctrine, so you won't be getting the extra damage when your opponent charges you back. Next let's talk through some of their strong character options and stratagems. They're able to pretty powerfully stack Warlord traits and can spend 1 command point to take 2 Warlord traits on the same model if they want to make an exceptionally fighty bike character perhaps. Chigorian Storm can do +D3 attacks, and that can combo pretty nicely with the Imperium Sword, the core codex one that gives you extra strength and attacks. Master Rider allows you to reroll all charges and is -1 to hit in melee for a bike unit. And Master of Snares is a potentially really disruptive one. On a 4+, the enemy unit can't fall back against it. Could be extra nasty, maybe if you do manage to pile into some enemy chaff after you've killed something. The one that grants Obsec from the core codex Space Marines can be pretty handy as well. White Scars can move really fast, and you could perhaps jet a bike character all the way across the board and steal an objective from the opposing forces. For the White Scars stratagems, it's mobility everywhere, and there's a lot of flexibility with how your units move, and some charge and fight phase shenanigans. You can pay a 1 command point to allow a biker unit to advance and shoot, 1 CP for a -1 to hit an advancing unit, 2 command points to double move any unit, though you can't shoot or charge after that, it would just be to gain the extra mobility and maybe get to an objective or something. But it's good to have all of these in the bag if you just do need that little bit of extra damage, survivability or mobility. For 1 CP you can outflank a unit, and it's far better than Strategic Reserve that way. He could come in straight into the enemy deployment zone turn 2 if your opponent has left enough room, and that could be a way to get some slower moving units into the fray. There's 1 CP to fall back and shoot. Sometimes that will certainly be worth it, as you're going to be falling back and charging quite a bit. And if you've got a long charge to make, there's 1 command point for a 3d6 and drop the lowest charge, usually averaging you around about an 8 or a 9. That could be an extra way to reliably get a unit in out of deep strike as well. If you have that and budget for a command reroll, then they're very likely to hit home. Lightning Debarkation is an interesting one that can make transport vehicles just that little bit more viable. It's 1 command point to basically work like an impulsor. You can get out of a non-flyer transport after moving, though you're not allowed to charge. This is probably most interesting with any firstborn marines jumping out of rhinos or maybe even land raiders. I guess particularly anything that's got a fair amount of shooting on it. I guess maybe theoretically something like grav devastators or multi-melters. Probably a bit niche really to build around, but it is quite fun. Finally, after you've wiped something out, you can spend a 2 command points for a massive extra consolidation move, either a D3 plus 3 inches on most units, or a huge D6 plus 6 on jump pack or bike units, anything with more than 10 movement. A bit pricey at 2 command points, but if it does make the difference between you locking up multiple enemy shooting units and them not being able to fire again, that could easily be worth the command point tax. Moving on, we have the White Scar's psychic powers. Compared with plenty of the other chapter-specific disciplines, I think that the White Scars ones are really quite strong. Maybe my single favourite is Ride the Winds, a +2 to advance and charge power. It's really good on a deep striking unit to allow them to get in on a 7-inch charge out of 9 inches. But if you're starting on the board and you have a unit that's advancing, that's an extra 4 inches worth of threat range. That would give you an average charge on a unit of Blade Guard veterans of around about 21 inches, provided you're moving, advancing and charging with this in effect. Other cool ones are Storm Wreathed. Your unit can't be overwatched, and when it makes a successful charge, it has a chance to deal some mortal wound impact hits. Blasting Gale to debuff an enemy unit. It can't advance and only rolls 1d6 inch for charges. And there's several options for throwing out mortal wounds if you just want your Psyker to do a fair bit of smiting. If those powers are integral to your strategy, it might be worth it investing in the Mantle of the Stormseer for a +1 to cast. Could be worth it seeing as a few of these are casted on 7s as well. Otherwise, for the White Scar's unique relics, the Plume of the Plainsrunner is really quite a nice one. You get +1 to advance and charge for nearby infantry, and that could be a good choice on either Blade Guard or Vanguard veterans. Finally, I also quite like the relic bike Wrath of the Heavens. It gives your Warlord a 16-inch move. When added to a 6-inch advance, that's a massive 22-inch movement, and you can move over enemy models and all intervening terrain, so you can potentially charge jet bike-like straight at your opponent, ready to unleash some serious rage on them. Finally, I think that the Teeth of Terror from the core codex is a really nice choice. Its flat 2 damage will become flat 3 damage on the charge and the assault doctrine, and in combination with a Warlord trait or 2, you can make your Smash Captains into true murder machines. With Chigorian Storm active, that'll be an average of 10 attacks on the charge, at strength 5, AP -3, and a big flat damage of 3. The White Scars also have a couple of their datasheets of their own, and it's generally good news on both of them, particularly for Corsair Khan, who I think is perhaps one of the most competitive Primaris character models out of any of those recent character sculpts for the various chapters. For a unique character, he's very cheap indeed at 110 points, and though he is on foot, this isn't anywhere near as much of a problem for characters from the White Scars army as it is for other chapters. Being able to advance and charge, he still has that very respectable threat range. He strikes with Moonfang, typically 6 attacks at strength 6, AP -3 and damage D3, and he'll absolutely obliterate normal characters in combat, as you're allowed to reroll the wound roll and the damage roll. Really though, the biggest reason that I'd want to take Khan is that he takes nearby melee units really to the next level. If the unit made a charge move or heroic intervention in the previous phase, you get to add +1 to the wound roll, making out like they're Blood Angels or something. That on top of his reroll 1s to hit as well, for being a White Scars captain, means that units like Blade Guard get to become true anti-everything threats. Say you have 5 Blade Guard veterans targeting a Space Marine vehicle. In the White Scars Assault Doctrine, they're damage 3, and with average rolling, they'd still do something like 14 wounds to your standard Toughness 7 vehicle or Imperial Knight. With Khan nearby though, that goes absolutely through the roof, very nearly doubling their damage potential, going to around about 25 wounds, meaning that you could potentially comfortably engage multiple hard targets at once and kill them all with the same unit. Never mind Khan's decent melee prowess as well. Probably his only major downside is that he has a pretty underwhelming Warlord trait, so you want another character around to bear some of the good options that the White Scars had to offer. But I think that Corsair Khan is certainly a very strong model, and he seems to frequently crop up in White Scars lists. The other unique White Scars datasheet is their generic option for a Khan on bike. He is a generic character, so you can take warlord traits and relics on him, and he does have significant advantages over the captain, getting a very decent melee weapon and essentially what amounts to a storm shield in that buckler, included for only 10 points over that base captain's cost. His Khan spear is normally strength 5, AP 3 and damage D3, which isn't really too bad at all to be honest, but whenever he makes a charge move or heroic intervention, that goes all the way up to strength 8, so easily able to damage some heavies on the charge. That buckler just adds 1 to his saving throw, so he'll normally have a 2+ save, something that would normally cost 10 points on a Space Marine captain. He's very efficient as a bike character, and is a popular choice to lead forces into battle and bear relics and warlord traits. Otherwise, there's a ton of stuff from the core Space Marine Codex that works really well with the White Scars. In the HQ section, the captain on bike is still a good option. He's a bit more flexible than the Khan, so if you want some specific gear, then he might be a way to go. The Primaris Chapter on bike is another really powerful option. He can provide some great melee buffs, and can be an enormous threat in his own right when tooled up. Taking the Benediction of Fury and the Mantra of Strength, potentially he can get to be a flat damage 5 attack chaplain, and can smash some heavies into little pieces with contemptuous ease. I have mentioned them a fair few times throughout the course of the video, but I think that both Blade Guard veterans and Vanguard veterans are some of the very best choices that White Scars can field. The Blade Guard just work with them so well. The mobility really is what they lack, otherwise they're really tough and always deal consistent damage in combat, only amped up further by being +1 damage to a flat damage of 3. Having 2 or 3 5-man units of Blade Guard at the heart of a White Scars list gives your opponent a very tanky problem to deal with, and if they get too close then they're going to absolutely butcher them. Otherwise, Vanguard veterans with Storm Shields and Lightning Claws are another very popular choice. These units provide a flurry of attacks, and making all of those attacks damage 2 with the White Scars combat doctrine means that they can comfortably claw to death heavies and elite infantry as well. They did see a small point increase in the recent chapter approved, but I still think that they're worth it. In White Scars they have an average threat range of over 22 inches, never mind any of the other movement buffs that you can potentially get, such as Plumes of the Plane Runner. White Scars are of course synonymous with bikes, and they're certainly more efficient with White Scars than they are with a lot of Space Marine chapters, but they're still maybe not quite as outstanding numbers-wise compared with say Blade Guard and Vanguard. Comparatively, I do think that both Bikers and Outriders are a touch overcosted right now, and I maybe more see them as a luxury pick, just to have something with enormous threat range that can jump all the way into the opponent's deployment zone and lock something up right in one turn. With the bike synergy though, attack bikes are pretty reasonable firepower, though things like Eradicators and Inceptors with their assault weapons both work pretty well as well. For objective securing units, I'd be quite tempted by Intercessors by auto bolt rifles. They've got a good balance between melee power and shooting with quite a bit of firepower at mid-range, and if there's ever going to be a chapter where assault intercessors are viable, it's probably either here or the Blood Angels. Advancing every turn to get them there faster and potentially damage 2 chainswords when they get there sounds very good to me. Finally, units like Incursors in particular might be quite scary, always good for some simple objective holding in the midfield, and then potentially a bit of combat threat with their long charges right from turn 1 if it's needed. Finally, just to round off, here's a White Scars army list, a list by Oliver Smith, who won the W4 Gaming GT with White Scars quite recently. This one's a bit of a thinking outside the box one, and quite an interesting list as it goes, with a mix of White Scars and a Dreadnought strategy. It's led by Khosrow Khan for all the good reasons that we talked about earlier, and then a Primaris Tech Marine with Hunter's Instincts and the Plume of the Plane Runner, and he's no doubt going to be walking up the board alongside the 3 Relic Contemptor Dreadnoughts, all of which are packing those twin Volkite weapons, and 2 of them have Typhoon missile launchers, able to make one of them hit a bit better, heal 1 per turn, and is a bit better against shooting vehicles and monsters with Hunter's Instincts that gives him +1 to wound against them. For objective scoring, there's a unit of 5 Incursors, good to control the midfield, and a couple of units of Intercessors with auto bolt rifles, then 3 very meaty units of 10 Vanguard veterans, all with Storm Shields and Lightning Claws, which will provide an absolutely devastating melee threat charging straight forward. I believe that this list was before the Space Marine FAQ, so you might just need to drop a couple of Van Vets here just to make room for the extra points needed for them and the attack bike. It doesn't really change the way that you play the list though. Finally, for mission purposes, harassment and screening, there are a couple of Landspeeder Storms. Again, they can be moving very fast indeed, jump into table quarters or nuisance charge enemy units, and then a single solitary attack bike with a multi-melter, likely to do the same, but also provide a little bit more firepower while doing so. Overall, looks like a really fun list to play, lots of hefty damage dealing here. and it's quite interesting to see White Scars using quite so much of a ranged approach as well as their already devastating melee. I've no doubt we'll continue to see plenty of performance for the White Scars going forward. They're a really cool army, and I'm sure will be an absolute blast to play on the table. Let me know if you have any other tactics or insights that work well with the White Scars on the table at the moment. I certainly look forward to having a read of the comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the 40k videos coming, with new content coming out pretty much every day. Finally, if you'd like to help keep the videos coming, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.